lounging, son.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and I have my co-host Jen with me for another episode of Thought Balloon. And today we're going to be talking about...
With the current cancel culture, should we censor certain comic books?
Okay. With the current cancel culture, should we censor certain comics? Man, that's a tongue twister to say. So, Jen, I'm really glad you brought this up. I think it's a topic that all of us, especially this year, I think it's a very important topic. And I can't believe that I didn't think about talking about this with you, because it was brought up so often on the podcast. I mean, all of us on Instagram have talked about it, whether it's messaging or comments. And I think this is the year that I've seen it more than any other year. Yeah, we've seen Comicsgate is a type of their own subsect of cancel culture. But, a lot of the creators with the Me Too movement has kind of come into the comic book industry. We're seeing some huge names being canceled. But in comic books, it's not a one-man show, right, for the most part. So we have people that work with these writers, right, like Warren Ellis. That's to me, that was the biggest name. That was a name that I really loved his work, and I haven't been able to pick up a book that he wrote since then, just because it's in the back of my mind. But then you have the artists, the inkers, the colorists, the letterers, the editor, all these people that helped bring it. It wasn't just him. So it's I've often wrestled with that. Is it okay to read it? Because these other people also put their hard work into it. So, like I said, I'm really glad you brought up the subject. And before I share my thoughts, I give a little bit of a brief thought on with Warren Ellis, because that's the biggest one to me. But I'd love to hear your opinion on all this.
Yeah. For me, I wanted to talk about it because for me, it's such a gray area. Right? I've been racking my brain about it ever since a couple of months, because I've been approached on Instagram. Recently, when the parody of Batman Dem came out, somebody messaged me and was like, "Hey, I'm surprised that you posted about this, because you know that this guy is a very is a dick. He's the creator is a very mean person, especially towards women." And I was like, oh, I didn't know about that. And ever since then, I was like, should I remove my post? Should I not? Should I still keep my copy? Should I not? And it's been very intense in my brain, because I've been thinking about history, right? Every time I have a dilemma, I think about what happened in the past, in our history as human beings. And you know that there's been a lot of censorship in the culture, especially literature. So, for example, in the World War II, they burned so many books, right? Because it was against, they wanted to control the population in society. And that's a type of censorship. And censorship is kind of everywhere. It's if you talk about a person who's deep into government controlling our lives and stuff like that, they're going to talk about censorship. And I'm like, I'm not sure how I stand in front of this. But in the comic world, I'm not sure either, because yes, I don't want to encourage, for example, Ellis, who was accused of being sexually inappropriate with women. I don't want to encourage this person, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm not in favor of censorship. I'm not in favor of, especially in culture and literature, and comic books is a type of literature, right? I'm not in favor of censoring and canceling and stopping selling some certain type of comic books, because I believe that we still need to be in touch with history, and we still need to be in touch with certain novels and certain type of literature, because it's important to understand, especially, for example, World War II, right? So many things were censored in World War II, but we still need those things, because we need to understand why and why not it happened. We need to understand and think about how and why World War II happened, right? Hitler and stuff like that. It's important to be in touch with this. And I know that this is a very, it's a very, when I think about World War II, it's this opposite thing. But the things that happen in comic books, it's more in the middle, but it's still linked together. Cancel culture, I think, can go right very quickly if we're not paying attention. If we're starting to cancel comic books are starting to cancel certain writers and certain illustrators because we all have different opinions, and I do not agree with what they're doing. I do not agree with their behaviors. I do not agree with what they're saying, but I still think I'm not sure like I said, it's a gray area. Like I'm not gonna purchase them, but I think they should be canceled per se. You know?
Yeah, right. And I agree. Okay, look, I am a firm believer that people can change. You know what I mean? And again, like you said, I'm not condoning the behavior. I have a daughter. If I ever found out that some dude was treating my daughter that way, I could probably possibly put myself in jail for my actions. You know what I mean? Like, I will do anything to protect my kid. But in the same sense, you know, like let's talk about Brian Wood, for example. Okay, the writer of DMZ, which is one of his most famous books. I would say there's a DMZ show coming out. One of the women that he was inappropriate with, she's working on the show. You know what I mean? So I find that kind of like gratifying to know that, like, okay, he was kind of creepy with her, kind of a creep. But now she's working on the adaptation of his book, right? And then also in the same breath of that kind of stuff, right? I've like on Twitter, there have been female creatives that have said, you know, he's making a change. He's actually trying to change. But then you look at somebody like Warren Ellis, who, with that fake apology, like not really owning up to his behavior, I'm just like, you know what? And again, like same with Brian Wood, like I would argue that I like DMZ more than most of Warren Ellis's work. Now, Transmetropolitan was huge for me. I love that book, but DMZ is one of my favorite series of all time. Like I've read it multiple times. You know, I still haven't read it, but I haven't got rid of it either. I know that there's the extreme, right, where people not only will they not read it, but they're like, I got to get rid of this. I don't want it in my house anymore.
But I think that's the point where it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
Getting rid of stuff and like destroying certain comic books and stuff. It's like we are in the censor right now. We're in like the censorship of literature, of the culture. And I know it's a very sensitive subject. I know that not people will agree with this, but I do not think that it's the way to go to like get rid of everything.
I do think that based on the actions of the person, if we're just talking about canceling, okay, just about like a creator that we found out was like really douchey or a scumbag or whatever. There is a writer, Gerard Jones, okay, old school writer. He wrote a book about kind of, I think it was some sort of like a history in comic books. I forgot the name of the book. It's besides the point. But I bought the book because I'm like, it was a novel and I wanted to read it. And then I found out like a month later on a comic book news site that he got arrested for child pornography. I took that book and I threw it in the trash. There is a certain level of, if somebody does something, I have no problem throwing away that work. There's certain stuff you cannot come back from in my eyes. I'm sorry.
No, of course.
You know what I mean? Like, and I'm sure you probably didn't even hear about that because it wasn't like a big thing. But like, so we had like a Green Lantern cop because he used to write Green Lantern back in like the late 80s. And I saw it come through the store and I was like, and I told Nick, I was like, dude, you know, did you hear about what this dude did? And he's like, no. And it's because they didn't make a huge deal about it. Like, you see what they did with Warren Ellis. I think they should have made a big deal about this dude. Child pornography, that's fucking disgusting.
That's horrible.
You know what I mean? So, and I told Nick, and I was like, I kind of want to just take this and throw it in the trash. And you know, I mean, whatever. He had it in the shop, but like, I will never support somebody with that. And at that point, I'm sorry, I don't care. I apologize to the artist that worked on that book, but like, I cannot have any of his work in my home. I can't condone it. But, you know, Jason Latour, right? Brian Wood, Warren Ellis, all these people that were just kind of creepy. And again, not good behavior, not okay. But I believe that people can change. And if you can actually change your behavior and you can own up to what you did that was wrong, admit to yourself and to everyone else, and really try to change and make yourself better and apologize to the people that you either harmed inadvertently or knowingly, that I'm willing to like move past it too as a fan and maybe change my perception of you. But as of right now, like Warren Ellis, he's been quiet. But and also, I'm all for the publishers not giving them work. You know what I mean? Like maybe you don't get rid of their old stuff, but you don't
but
need
not
to.
new,
You
not
don't
encourage
give
the
them.
new stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Don't give them new work. Look, Brian Wood hasn't written comic books since I think Sword Daughter from Dark Horse was the last book he wrote. Okay, he lost all his other books that he was writing for them. Warren Ellis, DC put out the rest of his Batman's Grave. I don't know if
but
the
it's
script's already done.
DC, you know how they are.
Yeah. I know. So, but no other work, right? I think he might be off of Castlevania from Netflix. Not sure. Jason Latour gone. He just like a ghost. He fucking vanished. But then, like, do we stop liking Spider-Gwen because he co-created her? Are we canceling the character as well? Like that, like there's just so many different things that it can lead to, and I think cancel culture can be very toxic, and I even hate the phrase cancel culture, but it's like it's so prevalent in our society that like we're so quick to be like, oh no, I don't want to talk to him anymore. Like Tom King, when he did that thing with Jay Lee, do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. I was like not liking it. I was like, whoa, this went to hell really quickly.
Yeah, and then, he's like, oh, I talked to Jay Lee, and we're cool. And Jay Lee's like, no, we didn't talk. I don't know what he's saying. And so, like
he almost destroyed his career over nothing.
Right, and part of me was like, I don't know if I really am feeling Tom King right now. Like, I still have been reading Strange Adventures. I haven't read Rorschach because I don't think I think that the Watchmen character should be left alone because of Alan Moore. But other than that, I'm reading his stuff. I think that at least he apologized and he admitted he was wrong. And while some people could say his apology felt flat and not genuine, whatever, he still said sorry. And I think he was trying to preemptively, it was contempt prior to investigation. But even Tom King was trying to cancel. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not just us as fans, like creatives are canceling each other. I think the biggest person is Ethan Van Sciver from Comicsgate, right? And it's hard for me because he has illustrated some of my favorite DC stories. I haven't read them, not purposely. I just, I used to do my reread of like the Flash stuff that he did or the Green Lantern stuff he did, and I haven't. But it's hard. It's hard when I look at those pages of his art. I'm like, man, that dude's a fucking piece of shit. Yeah. He attacked Gail Simone on social media, and I love Gail Simone. So I think the cancel culture it's a kind of a touchy subject because I've heard so many opposing things. I think I'm more in line with what you're thinking. Like, well, we don't have to get rid of everything because there are other people that helped create it, but at the same time, we don't need to like give them
encourage furthermore.
No.
Yeah, I just find it very ironic that thing. I think that's this thinking of me finding it very ironic that it's making me ask a lot of questions. So I think it's ironic that in an era of everyone preaching freedom of speech, we are also very high on cancel culture, which is they don't go together, right? Cancel culture and freedom of speech, it's clashing, right? Mm-hmm. And when I think about that, and I agree with that statement that cancel culture and freedom of speech is clashing together, I'm thinking, you know what? Like, if I don't agree with censorship and cancel culture and freedom of speech, if I agree with that, this means that I also agree with people having their own, like, Comicsgator, right? So I can't say that I'm in favor of freedom of speech, but being against Comicsgator expressing themselves, And I think this is where I find that it's a very gray area because I'm like, I'm not like I'm saying what I'm saying, like
you're contradicting it.
Exactly. And I find it very difficult because morally I'm against Comicsgator, but I'm also in favor of freedom of speech. And that's where it's very blurry, and I think that cancel culture is part of that. It becomes very blurry because if you cancel, for example, Comicsgator, you have to cancel everyone, right? It's not, it has to be uniform. It has to be the equals for everyone. But then you're like, it depends on the thing. It depends on what they did. So it's such a gray area and so difficult. It's like a mind twister, right? If you start thinking about it, it's like an infinity loop. You're like, yes, but if I do this, then I have to do this. But if I do this, I have to do this. And it's like always coming back. And I find it very difficult. I feel like we should talk about it more because it comes back to the subject we spoke about a couple months ago. Should we separate the art from the artist, right? It becomes, it's linked together because should we cancel an artist that we disagree with? It's like J.K. Rowling. She's being very, very toxic on social media, but we're not canceling Harry Potter, right? But
yeah,
you know,
right? Yeah. And that is just one person's work. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So why are we giving her this free pass with Harry Potter, but we're not giving a free pass to someone else? But like I agree with you that we have, like, for example, the guy who was accused of child pornography. That's like that's a no for me. That's, you can't keep that. You can't. It's impossible to keep this, to encourage this writer. But at the same time, you can give it's a morality problem, right? We don't have the same levels of this is okay, this is not okay, right? So it all becomes like a society problem, and it all becomes something that we need to discuss more. And I think it's very important that we open this conversation a lot more. I want publishers to speak up about it. I want writers to speak up about it without being like, cancel this guy, but maybe like, hey, this guy was fired because of this. Like, people need to be informed. For example, what happened with me on the guy who wrote the Batman Them parody. I had no idea who he was. No idea whatsoever. How can I make a choice if I don't even know what he did and if I don't even know who he is? Because we don't talk about this. We don't talk about all of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Dave Sim, he created Cerebus, right? The longest running creator-owned title, right? Over 300 issues. And it's not like I didn't learn till recently, but it's been going on for years. He's very misogynistic. But people don't talk about it because he's not really the public eye. He's not like Warren Ellis. He's off in his own little corner.
But we should still speak about it.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is not a lot of people know. I've been reading comic books for over 25 years, and I only learned about it like a year ago. It's because he's not a higher profile creator that people don't talk about it, because you can't talk about it if you don't know the guy. If you don't know his work, then you're not going to talk about it. You know what I mean? So I think that's why. But I got it. I mean, I remember you sent me the messages that this person sent to you, and it's like, well, instead of trying to educate, she's trying to she was trying to make you feel bad, kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Not knowing.
I don't agree with that.
And I think that is the toxic part of cancel culture, because all she had to be like was, have you not heard about this guy? Ask that question, and then you're like, no, I'm like, oh man, he's kind of a scumbag. I don't think you should support his work. That's all it had to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Give you the information, allow you to make your opinion, and call it a day. Not make somebody feel stupid or bad that they didn't know what a scumbag the person was. But
I think that's the dangerous part also of cancel culture. It's like, if you don't agree with me, then you're the bad guy. Or if you were not aware of that, then you're a bad guy. How can I be aware of that? We need to educate ourselves. We are a community of fans who love comic books. We need to educate ourselves instead of saying, don't read that. Don't read that. This writer is a dick, whatever. You have to say, listen, I don't agree with this writer's work because of that. And then let the person decide.
Yeah,
I think that's the dangerous part of cancel culture.
Yeah, and then don't shame people. Like, if let's say I wanted to read Warren Ellis's book still. Does that make me a bad person because I'm reading a fucking comic book? No. If you don't want to read it and you feel a certain type of way about him, you're entitled to your opinion. I'm not going to make somebody feel bad because they're like, oh, I can never touch his work again. I'll never read it. I'm not going to. I talk about it with Nick. He doesn't want to read Warren Ellis' stuff. He doesn't want to read Brian Wood's stuff. Now he'll mess with me and he'll be like, oh, you're cool though because you don't mind reading a work by a scumbag. I'm like, well, I haven't read it, but I'm trying to be devil's advocate. Like I said, people can change. There's plenty of people that you and I are both friends with, I'm not going to say any names, that kind of take the cancel culture to extreme. People that I know on Instagram. And I'm just like, to me, it's just too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're going to make me feel bad. Like Jeff Johns, there was some stuff people were saying about him, right? But no concrete evidence. You know what I mean? Like, so you want me to cancel him based on a sentence, one sentence that I saw online. I'm like I'm an asshole because I want to read it, or I still say he's one of my favorite writers. No, I'm not. I'm not gonna cancel somebody on a whim. You have to fucking do something very horrendous to me for me to not want to support your work. And
Okay, let me ask you a question to you and to everyone who's watching. Brian K. Vaughan, tomorrow there's something that comes out, an article that says that he did something terrible.
How terrible?
Very terrible.
That's my.
Very terrible. Very terrible. Something on the line of other people.
Don't put it out there. We don't want to put it out there. The universe. I don't know. You know.
Or do we cancel Saga? Because Saga was life-changing. Saga changed the comic book industry. Saga changed image comics industry. Do we cancel Paper Girls? Paper Girls also changed the industry.
Well, I think what happens is when you find out somebody does something like douchey or is an asshole, right? You look at their work differently. That's not going to change. Whether you cancel them and stop reading their work is besides the point. When you read that, like if he does something fucked up and you go to read Saga, that's going to be in the back of your mind while you're reading it. You're going to try, like, at least for me, you would try to correlate it like, so when he was writing this, was he really intending this, even though I thought he was intending that? Like Transmetropolitan, right? The main character, Spider-Joseph, is kind of scummy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like then finding out all this stuff about Warren Ellis, I was going back thinking about the story, and I'm like, oh my god, like he was totally putting himself in this. So was he really treating people like that? So like that kind of stuff will permeate through your head, like, you know what I mean, like as you're reading stuff. So I don't know what it would take for me to like cancel something that is really beloved to me. You know, like if Jason Aaron, that would kill me. Like if I couldn't read Scalped again because he did something fucked up, I don't know. You know, like, but I like to think that I hate to say this, but there's certain people that got canceled that it didn't shock me. That's all I'm gonna say. Like it didn't, like Warren Ellis. Like I heard about it, I was like, it kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, and it's mean. It's mean to say, but it's kind of true. Read his work. Read the way his dialogue is. You know, some of his characters, like he kind of writes assholes, so it's not too far off to think that he's a fucking asshole, right? Yeah. And then Jason Latour, I would say maybe a little bit differently, because you're not really reading, like he writes, but you don't really read most of his stuff is like the art, right? And then he wrote some Spider-Gwen, and I haven't read enough of his stuff that he wrote, so that was a little bit shocking. That came out of nowhere. Brian Wood, same thing. That one was kind of shocking. So not every, like I said, Warren Ellis wasn't a shock, but then there is also that shock. And then like the people that do shock you, like let's say Brian K. Vaughan, when you go back, you would just be like, I would be looking for like the correlation between him as a person and what he did, and then how he put that in his writing, because they always say you write what you know, right?
Yeah.
So you always put a little bit of yourself in whatever you're writing. That would be devastating. There's certain creators that like would just kill me if I found out. You know, because like
it still comes to the same, you know, like I think we are really quick to cancel, especially if we don't like the work. But when it's a very important work that they did, we need to ask this question. So I think it's a really great, I was thinking about this because I knew that we were going to talk about this. So I was thinking about this subject, and I was like, let's do this exercise of taking my favorite writer and saying tomorrow morning he's going to be a scumbag. What do I do? You know? And it's a very great exercise to like think about, because you'll feel conflicted, and you'll see that you'll find like in favor and against cancel culture, and you'll find that it's a very I'm just saying this, it's a really great exercise to do in your life, to like take something that you love and place it in a position of like judgment and feel and see how you react to it. It's very interesting.
Okay, what would you do?
I don't know. I'm not in, like I said, I'm not very in favor of cancel culture, and I don't, for example, if Brian K. Vaughan, I'm like I said, it comes back to, should we separate the art from the artist? And I am able to separate the art from the artist, especially great art, like for example Saga. I will not be able to I'm not, when I read Saga, I do not think about Brian K. Vaughan. I think about Saga. I think about the characters. I think about the story. I do not think about the writer. I don't even think about who did the illustrations, who did the color, who's the publisher. I don't even think about that. I just think about the story. So for me, it would be easy to separate the art from the artist.
Yeah, and it's like we're
And
not
I would
cancel.
keep reading it.
Yeah, I mean we can't cancel Hellboy. Scott Alley edited all those books, and he's a fucking scumbag. So,
Exactly.
there's no way I was getting rid of Hellboy. But I mean, I guess that's a little bit different because he's editing the book as opposed to like it coming from him. Like he didn't create this stuff; he just was there.
But like I
But
said, for example, first taking again my example for Saga, I would keep my books of Saga because I like it, but I would not support furthermore. I would not purchase or I would not encourage the publications of new books, you know?
so what you're telling me right now is that tomorrow something happens. When Saga comes back, you're not gonna read it. You're not gonna know how it ends.
Exactly.
I don't know. I couldn't do that. I don't know if I could do that. That would be hard. That would be very rough because I've been waiting so long for it, and if I just not reading it again, I don't know.
But like I said, it's a very gray area, and we all have our own levels of what's right and what's wrong, you know? And for me, that's my level. It's like I can keep what I have, but I'm not gonna go further.
Okay.
You know?
That's the cancel culture part of it. Let's talk about the censorship part of it. So when you got into comic books, what year was it, would you say?
My God, I was 17. I don't know what year it was.
Okay, but
I'm 24 right now, so just do the math.
Okay, so there you go. So when you got into comic books, the Comics Code Authority was gone.
Yes.
Right? Now, I have been like looking at, because a lot of the creators, or one of the creators that I'm going to be talking with soon, he made this post because Richard Corbin, the great Richard Corbin, just passed, right? And he made this post and he was like he kind of started talking about like censorship a little bit of what happened with the Comics Code Authority and how that kind of, I don't know the right word to say, but it kind of set the industry back a little bit because of that. Like we had EC comic books, and like because of the code, like we couldn't see certain things, and then that's why you had the underground and what the industry could have been if that never happened, right? Every comic book I had as a kid had that little fucking stamp on it. You know, like you didn't have to deal with that. So like when you came into comic books, nothing was being censored for the most part. You know what I mean? Like obviously Marvel and DC self-censor, but they have their own rating system now, right? Teen plus or mature or whatever, but they still will only go so far.
Well, I'm just gonna say this: Batman them, they censored themselves because now the next publications are gonna be censored. I'm just saying this.
And I think that came from corporate more than it came from DC proper. They knew what was in the book and they published it and they were fine with it
until it became a big deal.
It was very stupid. Very
exactly.
But yeah, I think censorship is another touchy subject because I think it also goes back to freedom of speech. I think freedom of art and being able to create whatever you want. But at the same time, like you don't want to see horrendous things or horrendous acts being published in comic books either.
How do you see this? That encourage violence? What's the like some things that encourage violence or hate? There's a specific sentence that they use, like it's freedom of speech except if you encourage hate or something.
I don't know the. Yeah, I don't know the phrase. But yeah, it's like that, and it's the same thing with like the cancel culture and all that stuff. It's all kind of looped in together. But I do think that there needs to be a level. Okay, Marvel and DC, they need to, because kids are going to read that shit. But in terms of independent stuff, I think there should be a little bit more freedom to create what you want. You know what I mean? Like there's a reason that the Comics Code Authority is gone. And it's because, like it was such an outdated thing. Frederick Wortham, when he came up with this thing saying that it was creating violent kids and it was like the work of the devil, all this type of shit, just making comic books something it wasn't, saying Batman and Robin were gay. I mean, it was just so out of control. And I think that it really, I don't want to say dumbed down, but it really limited the creative output that we might have seen from Marvel and DC back then. Because like a lot of the stuff that was pushing boundaries, like they would go and they were like, oh, you can't do this. Like really stupid stuff, like you can't see a zombie in a comic book. Like it doesn't even make sense. Like why is that being censored? But there was a couple times that Marvel or DC like went against him and would publish it without the Comics Code Authority. I was talking to somebody too that I was talking to who was it? An artist. I can't remember who I was talking to, but he was telling me how like they burned all their files, so like we will never see what they were censoring. And I think that that's like a form of like police state like behavior. You know what I mean? Like that is crazy. I know that I think you were going a different route with the censorship.
No, I totally agree with everything you said, and I'm glad that you talk about the code of comics or whatever it's called, because I like you said, I'm very young. But I was like, Ryan is gonna know about that. Ryan is gonna talk about it. So very interesting. When I think about censorship in comics, I'm thinking about crossover #1, because in that first number of this new comic, it's a universe where like superheroes basically destroyed the city. They killed a bunch of people, whatever, because there was a merge of two universes. And there's like a little part where the character is showing what an actual comic is looking like in that world, and it's censored. They can't talk about superheroes. They can't have comics about Superman or Batman or whatever. They can only have comics about city superheroes, so policemen, firemen, and stuff like that. And I thought it was very interesting to put censorship and that different, like this different view, you know. And I think that again, it's a great example of if you stop for a second and think about what we do with censorship, or what we did with censorship in comics, like you said, the code of comics and stuff like that. It's very similar to what crossover #1 illustrated. And if you think that's crazy, what they did of like censoring superheroes in their universe, you're going to think it's very crazy what we did when censoring comic books in our universe, you know? And I'm not in favor of censorship in that sense at all. I think I have a quote of Neil Gaiman. I saved it for this video. Let me grab it. Because Neil Gaiman wrote, he did a podcast with someone, and he spoke about that. Something he said was very interesting. He said, as long as the people are getting upset, a medium is not dead. And I think that's very interesting because from the beginning, comics have always upset some people. It was, even from the beginning, it was always a little bit political, or even if you take the alternative comic, which was fanzine, you know, that was very political, and it was speaking of, it was having like a more engaged message. Usually, it was always like against what some people said. I think that comic books were always a little bit against censorship, right? It was always like trying to say, in the beginning at least, it was always trying to say something different. And I'm very against censorship in every type of art or culture, so literature, movies, and stuff like that. And like I said, with the Batman Dem thing, I think it was very stupid to censor the comic that way. Very stupid.
I mean, yeah, look what we got with the next two issues. You could feel it. It was like watered down. It wasn't like the first issue, not that it was like, oh my God, this is amazing, and then the next two suck, but you could definitely tell, and especially like the release schedule, because then they didn't come out on time, and they kept getting pushed back, so you know that what was originally intended is not what we got. But I think that when you censor, you're limiting creativity also, because you're like, oh, you can't do this, this, and this, so you're not really getting the creative's best work when you're telling them you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you know, like, and that's why a lot of people back then, after the Comics Code Authority, you saw underground comics, and but some of those comic books are kind of dark. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some of them were very, very gory, very dark, depicting all manner of fucking crazy shit. But that's the flip side. When you tell somebody they can't do something, then sometimes they go to the extreme of what they want to do. I personally think we are in the least amount of censorship in comic books than we've ever been, because I think that there's so much diversity of type of stories, subjects, everything that we see. I think this is almost like a new golden age of comic books, in my opinion, because of how much content, how much different content we're getting, and you know. But at the same time, like I said, like with Marvel and DC, you do have that self censorship, and you know that they will only go so far. And I think that
it's hurting them.
In terms of imagery, I get censoring stuff because kids can see it. But in terms of themes or subject matter and what you're talking about, I think that doesn't need to be censored. I think that you can educate and inform people through the lens of superhero comic books, much like Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams did with their Green Lantern, Green Arrow run, where they would talk about racism, and it was really it was called The Hard Traveling Heroes, and Green Arrow and Green Lantern traveled the country in a pickup truck, and we're dealing with real world problems. You know what I mean? Like not corporate guys, but like a rich apartment owner, and how he was trying to kick people out of their apartment, or drugs or racism, stuff like that. So there's a way to do it in superhero comics without it being violent or gory, or without the imagery part of it, but the subject matter can be good. A SpiderMan comic book that Stan Lee wrote that was about drug addiction. Obviously, I think it was, I don't remember what they called it. It wasn't like a regular street drug, but the Comics Code Authority said we're not going to do it, and they did it anyway, and they published it. So I think that I would like to see more of those subjects. Like I mean, in Marvel and DC, I would like to see them touch on more real world problems, because I think it makes it a little bit more relatable in terms of like you're seeing these larger than life superheroes dealing with stuff that we would deal with in our society. So I think like you have the flip, you have like Image, you got Boom, you got all these other independent publishers that can pretty much do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a corporation that owns them. And I get it. Like you have Disney, like Disney's only going to want to go so far. And then you got Warner Brothers, which is now mostly AT&T, which they don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know what they're doing with their movies. They don't know what they're doing with their comics. I mean, they're just a fucking shit show over there. So I don't think we're going to get anything groundbreaking from them. I think even in terms of I think the last groundbreaking shit they did was Vertigo. And once Vertigo was gone, I mean, okay,
I miss Vertigo.
Their Sandman universe, okay, whatever, but it's not like they're not pushing any boundaries. You know what I mean? Like they're playing it safe.
Like when I think about Vertigo, the first title that comes to my mind is Preacher, and that was like pushing every buttons. That was like
that pissed a lot of people off, but they still did it.
They still did it, and it's still, for me, I liked it, and I totally understand why this comic is not for everyone, but I liked it. I'm glad they published it. I think it has a very cool, important message in it, but it's very gore and very intense. And I'm so glad that they did. And now, compared to like some other titles, I'm just like, meh. We still have like a little bit work to do.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. I think when DC stopped. Well, I think Image kind of helped Vertigo go away too, though. You know what I mean? Because you could get a better deal at Image, and Vertigo was never going to give people that kind of ownership over stuff. Like there's a reason why The Last Man is still owned by DC.
Yeah.
Well, not owned, but like Brian K. Vaughan could. He hasn't taken it to Image. I mean, I thought for sure after a certain time it would go to Image and he would publish it through there. But they just did a new version of it. I think under DC Black Label, which I hate that label, but like Vertigo was a signal of them pushing boundaries when they got rid of Vertigo. And I would even say like the last part of Vertigo wasn't really pushing too much of the envelope. But Marvel has, while they have at times put in some sort of real world problems, they don't do like they used to do. Like they did it way more in like the 60s and the Silver Age, I think, in the 70s and 80s, and it's kind of stopped. You know what I mean? They did have their Max line, which was an adult themed line, but even then, it's like that was just like Punisher. You know what I mean? It's for shock value. Alias, the one that I told you I think you would really like with Jessica Jones, that was kind of cool too, but it wasn't like it's not the type of boundary pushing stuff that I want to see from them. And I think that until Marvel and DC can kind of thread that line, you know what I mean, where you're not doing something that's very shocking, but you're able to open up new avenues for the creatives to really like express themselves through the lens of superheroes. I think that they're just going to be held back, and they're not going to, you know, catch up in the times. I don't know how else to say it.
100%. I totally agree.
But that's I can't that's all I got on censorship. I mean, you know, I get it to a certain extent, but you don't want to cripple creatives. I think that's the main my main opinion on it, right?
I mean, it doesn't need to be gore and doesn't need to be horrible. It just sometimes the tiniest, for example, for Batman Damn, it wasn't gore, disgusting, whatever. It was just nudity. It was just a man being naked, and I don't think that's.
It wasn't like it's not like they zoomed in on it. You know
exactly,
what I mean? Like,
it wasn't a full plan. That's what I'm saying. It's like sometimes censorship is just useless, and they make certain subjects taboo, and it needs to not be taboo. You know, it needs to be. We need to talk about certain things, and when I say talk about certain things, I'm not saying that it needs to be gore and disgusting and horrible. Just talk about it. Just don't censor yourself. Just talk about it in any way you want to express it, like I said. And that's what I think that's why censorship is wrong, is because, like you said, it's stopping the creators to express themselves. And we are missing very great opportunities to spread a message and spread information in a very good way.
Yeah. And I think that maybe more people would, like yourself, maybe would be more inclined to check out DC or Marvel if you feel like it was watered down content because they're too scared to push boundaries, you know?
Exactly.
They both kind of go hand in hand. I know I would love to hear your opinions. I think Jen would too. So throw those down below the comments in the comments section, you know what I mean? Or email us thecomicloungepod@gmail.com if you don't want to make your opinions public. And I'll share them with Jen. And if you're not already following us, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Comic Lounge. You can follow Jen at Life of a Geeky Mind on Instagram. And make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video goes up. And on that note, we're out.